Hi and welcome to this training video. My name is John Williams. I'm one of the directors of the Web Guys, and I'm going to be showing you around the WordPress system that we use to build your website, and is now the admin system that you can use to make changes, changes to the content, changes to the style if you wish, make additions and so on. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough of the system, and hopefully by the end of this session you'll have all the basics that you need to carry you forward. You will have received the username and password and login details for your website, hopefully along with this video, and they also are available from us if you need to get a reminder of them. The way we like to follow up this video, this video should give you all the basics that you need, as I say, that allow you to make changes. But inevitably there'll be questions that are specific to your website that perhaps we haven't covered in enough depth for you, or just things that you need a reminder of. We hold 2 weekly surgeries. These are open sessions between 9 and 10 on Tuesday and Friday morning. They're all online, so you can see the links on the screen there, and those links are available via our website and on this page as well. If you visit those links, basically it'll ask you to download a small piece of software, and you'll have to log in by giving your name and your email address, and then it will announce to us that you're ready and waiting. Now, it is an open and public session, which means that there might already be other people in there. So we have a sort of little waiting room area, and as soon as we see you there, we'll make contact with you straight away. Hopefully we'll be able to deal with your questions very soon during that session. If those times don't suit you, or if there's just a quick question that you need to ask and it's easier done by email, there's our email address, the support email address, support@thewebguys.co.uk. It goes into a structured system, and they're answered very quickly as possible, within 24 hours in 99% cases of support emails, and usually much quicker than that. We usually aim to get back to you within an hour or two. So without further ado, I'm going to change the screen now that you see, and that should also then show you the login details. Okay, so you're now looking at the login screen for one of our demo websites. Now, I'm going to be flicking between 2 tabs that I have here on my browser. Let me just show you the other one. I'm going to be using the main Web Guys demo site called Jupiter as an introduction, as a training basis for this video. The reason for that is that out of all our demos, you would have seen our templates when you made your choice for your own website. But out of all of them, this has probably got the most complex setup and all the different types of pages and content structures that you can have. So I'm going to use this one as the demo for this website, for this training video. All the admin logins for your websites will be your domain name with a / and then wp-admin. There are other ways to get to it as well, but if you type that, you're always going to get to a login screen like this. Now, you can see on this screen that I've already put in the username in this case, and the password is just remembered on my browser. As I say, you will have been sent the password for your website system. It's usually a long, complicated set of random letters and numbers and characters. It's deliberately like that. That's a WordPress feature for security purposes, so that your password is not guessable. You can change the password when you get into the system. I would strongly recommend that you don't, or if you do change it to something equally as unmemorable. So you need to make whatever arrangements that are appropriate to you to make a note of that password somewhere, or have it remembered in your browser. The danger in doing that is if you have an upgrade or you change machines, then it would forget. But anyway, I'm just going to log in without further ado. Now, this is WordPress. The first thing you get to see is the dashboard, and there's all sorts of stuff going on here, and to be honest, most of it you can completely ignore. The main navigation menu for the admin system is down the left-hand side here, and there's quite a few options here. I'm not going to go through all of them because they're not all relevant, but I'm going to pick out the main ones and take you through the main structure of the site. If you're not familiar with WordPress, by the way, WordPress started out as a blog system, and there is still a blog element to it, and you may well have that within your site as either a blog or a news section or something like that. It's now the most popular WordPress, the most popular website admin system, pardon me. Content management system is the jargon, or CMS. And it's in use in something like 60% of the world's websites, so it's massively popular, which means it's always updated, and it's got lots of different features within it. So the main thing that we're going to cover today is going to be, in this section here, pages. Now, the design of your website has been set up centrally. There are certain things that you can do within the system here, and I'll touch on those briefly. But by and large, the design is something that you've chosen and that we've developed in conjunction with you, and it's unlikely that you're going to want to change that more than superficially. The content, so the words and the pictures that appear within your site and within the pages on your site, are contained in this section, pages. So I just clicked on pages. Actually, there was a sub option there, all pages, goes to the same place. And what you're going to see when you click on pages is, as you'd expect, a list of the pages within your site. Now, because this is the main Jupyter demo site, there are a lot of pages within this site. And in fact, you can see on this screen that there are 172 pages. 172 items arranged over 9 pages of admin screens. Now, you're not going to have anything like that within your site. You've probably got 5 or 6 pages, something like that. In some cases, you'll only have a single page, because some of the designs are basically a single page that you scroll down in different sections on. Because this is quite a long, complicated list that's more complicated than usual, I'm going to use the search bar here, which is a useful way of getting in and out of pages. And the page that I'm going to start with is actually, if I go to the main website, is the About Me page. It's a relatively simple page, but one that still uses different layout elements. So I'm going to be flicking backwards and forwards between the website and the admin so that you can see how the two relate. Before I dive into About Me, I'm just going to find it. I'm just going to search for the word about, and you'll see that it's got a nice little search feature. It's brought up the various pages with about in the title, and there's the one I'm going to be using. Just before I dive into that, a couple of things about this screen. This is a very common layout within the WordPress admin system. You'll see lists like this wherever you go. There are a number of things I just wanted to point out here. You can see as I'm hovering my mouse over the various pages, some different options are coming up underneath. One of those is Edit, which is the main one we're going to be using today. And in fact, if I click on the title, it's the same as clicking Edit there. It just takes me into the main edit screen for that page. There is a Quick Edit option, which opens up a small panel of information underneath the page that just allows you to change things like the title, and the date it was published, which is, you're probably not going to need to use that very often, so I'm just going to cancel that. There's a bin option, and bin means put it in the recycle bin, or you'll see it called trash as well on this system. It's the American system. And what happens, that's to delete the page, as you'd expect, as it sounds. But what it does is it puts it into a trash category up here. And in fact, I won't do this. This is one of our main demo sites. So, but if I did put some stuff in the bin, you would see then a bin section up here. So it's in the same way as your recycle bin works on your computer. You have to then empty that if you really want to empty it. My suggestion would be that you never do empty your trash, because it takes up so little space. It's of little consequence, and you can always get back to an old page that way. View, as you'd expect, it just takes you to the live website version of that page. And Edit with Visual Composer takes you to something called Visual Composer, which I'm going to be showing you in more detail anyway on the Edit page, so I'm going to leave that. In this case, you can also see that the author, we've got one admin user on this site, and it's called TWG Demo, and the date it was published. These pages here that have a dash against them, you can see they also say they also have a parent page, and that's just a way of introducing a hierarchy. It actually has no effect at all on the structure of the pages on the live website that's public. It's purely a sort of admin convenience if you want to group things together in a certain way in the admin, because otherwise it'll just list everything alphabetically. But let's just click on About Me, which would be, as I said, the same as clicking Edit there, and that's going to take us into this page. Okay, so there's a few things going on here. The main area that we're going to be dealing with to edit the page is this Visual Composer section here, right in the middle and stretching down the page. I'm just going to deal with the other bits of information that's relevant before we get to that main editing section. So up here we've got a title, and the title of the page is partly an admin convenience, so that's what appears in the list. It's also what appears on the tab of the page as you view it on the website. Here you can see it says About Me, and then it says the Web Guys Demo just slipping off there. So it picks up the title there automatically. And also if you add your page to the main navigation menu, which is something I'm going to be covering later in this video, it will default to the title that you give it, although you can edit that as I'll show you later. So you just need, if you're creating a new page, you need to give it a title, and you can edit the title of the page there. Now this next section here called the permalink is a strange WordPress term for the URL or the web address of this particular page, and you can see it's actually it did have a parent page that's got an extra bit in there, but the edit button allows you to edit the very end part of the URL or the permalink. You can't edit the rest because it's sort of bound up in the domain name, basically. And what will happen is if you create a new page, it'll create an automatic version of your page title. In this case, you can see it's stripped out the capital letters. It's put a dash instead of the space. And if there were any special characters in there, like exclamation marks or question marks, which you can't have in a web address, it would just strip those out. So sometimes you might need to edit the permalink if you want something that looks a bit nicer in the browser address bar than the one that's been automatically given to you. I'll just cancel that. Then over here on the right, we've got a box called Publish, and you can see there's a few options in here. One of them is to preview changes. So if you're making changes to the page and you want to see those before they're updated, then that's the way you can do it. Once you click the blue update button, any changes you have made to that page will be live on the website. And if it is a page that is visible on the website, those changes will then be visible. So sometimes you want to preview those before you publish them. We have here status. This is a published page, but there is also a status called draft. Pending review doesn't really apply. It's if you've got some multiple admins and you've got one person in charge basically agreeing changes that other people have made. But draft is the one that you'll see most often, and that basically just takes it offline on the main website but keeps it in the admin system. When you're creating a new page, you can save it as a draft before you publish it. Visibility here is public, so it's a public page. If you add it to the main navigation menu once you've saved it, then it's visible to everybody visiting the website. There is also a password protected and a private option here. Now, password protected is a simple password that applies to this page for everybody. It's not like a membership login. Private is more like a membership login where you use the users built into the system. That's not something that I'm going to cover in any depth in this video. If that's something you'd like to know more about, please let us know. The publish date, which you can edit if you need to, and that's probably more applicable to blog posts. And just before we leave this, there's a move to bin there as well, so you can put it in the bin, in the trash. Before we leave this box, I wanted to make the point that if you save a revision, which I'm just going to do, I'm just going to update the page. I haven't actually made any changes, but I want to show you the effect of that. So there you can see that there are some revisions that are noted there. Now, a revision is every time the page is changed. And as you can see there, it's I did a couple of quick revisions, and you can see that there are 3. Now, the point of showing you that is that If you run into trouble or you make some changes that you didn't mean to, or you need to get back to a previous version of the page, you can do it. Every time you click the update button, it saves a version of the page. It also auto saves every few minutes, so you can get back to previous versions of the page. I'm not going to show you that in depth because it's not as user friendly actually, but it's more of a safety net and it's there. The other thing to say on that subject is that if you run into severe difficulties for whatever reason, it's very, very unlikely, but if if something went dreadfully wrong, we can actually roll the whole website back to any version that you had in the previous 30 days. So a couple of safety nets to be aware of. So down here we've got page attributes, and in most cases, if you don't have a vast number of pages, you won't need to use this at all. But I'll just draw your attention to the parent page there, because as you saw, there was a hierarchy of pages on our demo site. It's unlikely that your site has that, so we'll just sort of move on. And those are the only elements that I wanted to draw your attention to other than the Visual Composer. There is a featured image feature here, but that's not really relevant to pages. It's more about blog posts, so I will come back to that. So the Visual Composer, how does that work? You can see that we've got a series of grey boxes, and they span a horizontal section of the page. As we go down, you can see that these horizontal grey background boxes. Now, some of those, as this one with milestones in, and in fact the one at the top here, are also divided into columns, but that's the same grey horizontal area. And within each grey horizontal area, you've got a series of white blocks. And those white blocks often have an icon and a description of the sort of block they are, and then sometimes particularly for text-based blocks, you can actually see the content as well. So if I just show you on the website page how that relates. This top section, you can see we've got an image on the left, we've got some padding space, I'll explain what that's for, and then a title. So if we look at the page, we're looking at everything underneath this main menu, which is centrally controlled. And there you can see that we've got our image on the left. We've actually got a little bit of empty space, which is what the padding space is. And then we've got some large text, a title. As we go down the page, then we've got this grey background section called About Me, which has got some text on the left and these graphs on the right. So I'll show you that in the admin. There we've got our section, which the background colour for that will be set as grey, and I'll show you where that sits. We've got a title, the divider, which was the little horizontal line, and then we've got a two-column section with a paragraph of text with a drop capital, and then we've got these graphs, they're called skill meters, and some empty space in between. So that's the sort of the general idea of the structure of the page. Now, as I've been hovering my mouse over, you've probably noticed that each of these white blocks has a little green toolbar that appears as you hover over them. And there are a few options on that green toolbar. The first one is this multi-directional arrow, which is a drag and drop. So it means that I can move this block, and I'll just demonstrate this. If I click my mouse, I can pick it up, and as I move it around, it gives me a little sort of grey cross-hatched area to show me where I would be dropping it if I let go of my mouse, which I'll now do, put it back where it was. So that's great for restructuring the page, for moving things around. We've got a little pencil, which is the edit button. I'm going to come back to that last, because that's the one you'll probably use most often. We've got a clone button, which is just produces a duplicate or a copy of it. And if I show you, if I click on this now, you'll see what happens. I get a duplicate of the block and it appears right below it. So I can then drag my duplicate off somewhere else. And that's quite useful if you're trying to replicate a section and keep the format. You can then move it into place. And then the last option, which I'll use on my surplus clone, is a delete button. So I'll click the delete and it asks me to confirm. And there, that's gone again. So let's have a look at the edit button, which I just skipped over there. And that's going to be the one that you use most often. So every time you click an edit button on one of these blocks, you get this little pop-up window. and it contains various elements of the content that's going to be within that block and settings that go with it. And depending on what the type of block is, it dictates the settings that you will see, and I'm going to show you a few of the different blocks available. This is a fancy title, it's called. It's just called a title. I'm not quite sure why it's called fancy, but it is just a title. And you can see that there's a text box here, and the text box, pardon me, allows you to type in the box and to make various sort of simple formatting controls for the changes. So you can see that this piece of text is arranged on several lines. And if I was just to type some more in the box, you can see I'm just going to type some gobbledygook and then delete it again. It operates much as any word processing package would operate. We can also make things bold, which in this case you can see the words Ben and interfaces have been made bold. And there are some other controls, italics, bullet point lists, alignment options here. This one is a link. So if you wanted to make, I don't know, if you wanted to make the word design a link to somewhere else, you could. You click the button, having highlighted it, and then you'd either type or copy and paste your web address in there. And that can be any web address, an external website or part of your own website. You just hit the blue button to apply it there, which I won't do in this case. There is also actually a second line of icons on this toolbar, which is disabled by default. Also never quite sure why that is, but if you click that button, you'll get some extra lines, and you can do things like change the text color, put a stripe through it, and some other things that you probably won't need. So there you go, you type in the box. As I scroll down, you can see this is a title option, so there are various options like setting the color. Often you'll find with a title block that the color is not specified, and that's because there's a color specified centrally for title fonts, but you can override it individually here, which you might need to do if you've got a background image or something. Font size. If you responsive, this word here means what the website does when it's viewed on a mobile device. Responsive just means it changes its layout to fit the size of screen, and all your websites are responsive. Having said that, sometimes you need to adjust font sizes, particularly on titles, and if I switch that on, you can see that I've got a font size option to set them for individual types of size of device. Also, just scrolling down, there's various options here. I won't run through them all because there are many, but I just wanted to highlight on that subject this box, visibility for devices. So as I mentioned, your website is already responsive, so it will reorder itself and rejig all its content to suit the screen that it's being viewed on. Having said that, just occasionally you get instances where certain types of content don't work particularly well on smaller screens, for example. So a good example would be a large slideshow. Sometimes they just fill too much of the screen on a device, or the device is the wrong way up. It's a portrait screen rather than landscape. So with this option, you can set for each individual block, you can set whether it's visible or hidden on certain types of devices. Which can be useful. So two options here, save changes or close. Save changes, obviously, if you have made changes. Close if you just want to close it down and you haven't, and the X does the same thing, just gets rid of the box. So any changes you've made then to any of the boxes, you then need to click update on the button up here just to save all those changes on the page. So we'll show you a few other types of block. This one here is an image block. I click edit on that one. You can see that the main thing contained in this block, of course, is the image itself. But I wanted to show you how images are uploaded and where they're stored. So it says here, upload your image, and there's the page address of the image. But if I click upload, you'll see that there are two options here on the tab. There is an upload button where I can select my files, or there is a tab here called Media Library, and Media Library would show you all of the images that have already been uploaded to the site. Now, all of the images on this demo site are actually stored elsewhere, so initially we won't see any here, but I'm going to upload one file so that you can see that in action. And we'll take, let's see, what should we have? This is a screenshot. Let's just find something. There we go. Certificate of Excellence from TripAdvisor. Why not? It's a very small image, but we'll just select that, and you can see it's now uploaded and is appearing in the media library. So normally I would expect to see a large number of images there, and if you go to the media library on yours, you will see that. So then if I click Set Image, it's going to put that image into the box. In this case, I'm just going to close down that window because I don't want to change this image. Image sizing options. So the one that's set here is called Resize and Crop, and it says not recommended, but that's you can safely ignore that. It's absolutely fine. The reason it does that is that you can sort of end up with strange squashed images if you're not careful, but it's fine for trial and error. You can select from the default sizes. Now, when you upload an image to WordPress, what it does is it takes the original image size, and everything's in pixels, which is abbreviated to PX. A normal size laptop screen would be something like 1200 to 1600 pixels wide, just to give you an idea. But actual physical size of the screen has nothing to do with the pixel size, which is the resolution. So you can have very small screens that actually have quite high pixel resolutions because they're very high quality screens. So everything's in pixels, and you upload an image. If you were to upload a full size image from, say, a decent smartphone, it might be a couple of thousand pixels across, and that would remain as the original size. But WordPress automatically creates smaller sizes from your image and stores those. So you can choose one of those sizes, or if you choose Resize and Crop, you can manually specify the width and the height, as has been done with this image. And what that does is it crops. It either crops or it reduces or enlarges the dimension depending on the original image. So you can experiment with that. Sometimes you need to do it if you need to force a particular size, but most of the time you get away with original, large or medium. You can do various other things with the image, so you can create a link from the image. So if you click on the image, it goes somewhere else. And does that new tab open up does that new link open up in a new window or in the same window? You can give your image a caption and title and so on. You can set alignment here. Margin bottom, there's a margin is kind of empty space underneath, and that's set to a negative value. And the reason for that in this case is that image sits right on the boundary between that section and the next. So again, you can change that to get the result you want. In this case, I'm just going to close the box again. Some other options here. We've got a divider. Let's just show you the options of that. We've got some different styles. We can set the width. It can be a custom width, or it can be a fraction of the width available. The alignment, the thickness, padding is another way of saying margin. That's actually slightly different, but in most cases it does the same thing. It's empty space. Visibility for devices. So we'll just close those down. A padding space is one that you'll see dotted around. It's just a way of putting in some empty space. In this case, 20 pixels high is not very much. It's about a couple of paragraph lines worth of empty space, let's say. You'll see that quite a lot because it's quite a nice way of spacing things out, and things that get rammed up together on a website page don't look good. It's not easy on the eye. So we tend to use these padding space blocks just to so you've got a kind of visual way of spacing things out. And so on and so forth down the page. Before I leave this page, I also wanted to mention the fact that each of these grey sections also has the various edit options. They're slightly differently laid out. So in this case, the drag and drop icon, the multi-headed arrow, is over here on the left. So you can drag that whole section to somewhere else. So if I was to take this bottom one, for example, the second one, and just drag it so you can see how that works. You can see now that there's a crosshatch area here, so if I drop that, it would go there. I'm going to put it back where it was. I can edit the row. Let's take the next row, the next section down, because that had a grey background. So I know that that will be contained in the section settings. You can set a background image, which you will see on some sections of our websites. In this case, we haven't set a background image, but we have set somewhere, there we go, background color. So you can see, you can select a different color. You can either use one of the presets, or you can choose a preset and then kind of move around within the color picker. Or you can just if you happen to know the hex value, which is the kind of the website code value for that particular color, you can type it in the box. They all start with the hash key, and that can be useful if you've got several sections you want to keep in the same color. It's sometimes easy just to copy and paste that rather than trying to find the color on the picker. Or you can have no color at all, in which case it'll default to the standard for your particular website, which is usually white, when you'd hit the clear button. But I'm not going to change anything there. I'm just going to leave it as is, just to show you where things are. And then lastly, you can clone a section. So if you've got a repeating structure, that's quite useful. Clone the row or the section. Row and a section, by the way, do very similar things. There are some slight differences, but they're esoteric. You can clone your section and move it to somewhere else on the page, and then you can also delete it. This little button here just collapses it. So if you've got a lot going on the page and you don't want to see that because you're looking at something else, you can collapse there. You can also delete or edit a column. So this is a half-width column within this grey section. And the column settings are dictated over here. So we've got, if I just scroll my mouse over this little lined icon, you can see there are some standard layouts. So that one is 1/4, 3/4, and that one is 5/6, 1/6. So you can select one of those, or you can click custom, and you can put in your own fractions if you're good at maths. It helps. You can do anything that is anything down to 12ths, and it has to be divisible by 2, 3, or 4 basically. So you can do halves, thirds, quarters, sixths, and 12ths. So you can have up to 12 columns. So that's the basic idea of the column structure. One final thing is you've seen that there are plus symbols, no doubt, dotted around, and you tend to get them at the top and bottom of each column, and that could be multiple columns in a row here, or just a single one, in which case they're here. And they all do the same thing. If I click one of them, they bring up a pop-up box with all the different sorts of block that you can put in the website. And as you can see, there are lots. You're probably never going to need to go near any of them, but if you're the adventurous type, then feel free to play around with some of those. There's a search box up here, which is quite useful if you're using for one that you happen to know. So image is one we use quite a lot. There are different sorts of image boxes, but just the one called image is the one that's mainly used. Just on these different blocks, I mean, if you're looking for something particular, then do drop us an email to find out how to do it. A good way of referencing what some of these blocks do is to look at the elements section of our main Jupyter demo. So you can see we're at thewebguysdemos.co.uk. That's the main address of this. So if you go to elements, you can see it's just divided into 4 sections because there are lots. But you can scroll through some examples of pages there that show you these different sorts of things in action. So if you find some of those that you really like the look of and you're not sure where to find them on this quite long list, then just drop us a line and we'll help you locate them. So that's the About Me page, which is a relatively simple page structure, as I said, hopefully you've seen that the visual editor system is is reasonably intuitive and reasonably well structured. I did want to show you a more complex page as well, just so you can see the sort of the type of things you can do, but also to introduce to you the concept of some of these blocks have their content contained elsewhere. So in the case of this simple page that we're looking at, all of the blocks that we've edited, you can basically, some of them like padding space only have kind of one simple setting, but things like a title or a text block. Actually, we didn't look at the text block, but it's if I just click on the edit, you'll see it's very similar to the title. There's a box with some text in it. But the thing about these boxes is that you edit the content within the box. There are other sorts of block which which just simply have some basic settings here, but the content is controlled elsewhere. So I will explain what that means. I'm going to go back to the list of pages, and I'm going to go to the home page here. It's got a 2 or 3 of them in it. So just load the home page. And we're going to just, because we've got a large number of pages in this demo, I'm just going to search for the word home. So there are all the pages that have home in either in the title, or sometimes you get it in the description as well, so the other things appear. This is the one we're looking for, and you can see it says it's the front page. So we've got lots of different styles of home page because this is a demo site again. So I'm going to click on home page as we did with the about page. Right, good. I'm glad it's come up like that. If you see this, a load of gobbledygook, load of code on the page, what you need to do is click Backend Editor. And Backend Editor launches the Visual Composer. Sometimes, particularly if you're a techie type, you might need to get to that text view, but usually you won't. We've got the same grey sections, some divided into columns, some not, and the same white blocks with the content in them. But as I said, I wanted to, first of all, there's a whole lot more on this page. You can see it goes on and on and on. So there's no limit to the amount of stuff that you can put vertically onto a page. But the purpose of showing you this was the blocks that the content is contained elsewhere. And the very first block, this edge slider, is a good example of that. So if I go to the home page, the edge slider is this slideshow that's going on in the background. And you can see that it actually includes some videos as well. And there are various options that you can do with that. You can also see that that's a full screen slideshow. Let me show you how that happens. Same thing applies. You can drag and drop it, you can clone it, you can delete it, or you can edit it. And if I edit this one, then a few things happen. So there are lots of different settings here to do with slideshow speed and the type of scrolling and so on. But the one I wanted to highlight here is the select specific slides. Now you can, and very, very often, most of the sorts of blocks that I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes work in this way. They'll have a box where you can either select specific content, which is contained elsewhere, which is what I'm coming on to next, or you can just leave it blank. And if it's blank, it'll show you everything that it can find in that content section. So in the case of Edge Slider, we've got another option down here on the left called Edge Slider, and that's where the content for the slides is contained. And I'll go there shortly, but just wanted to sort of explain the concept of one or two of those. In this case, we've got some options to order it. They will either go in ascending order or descending order, and that's either menu order, which is the order in which they appear in the admin, or title is another one. So if you've given them titles, they'll go alphabetically, or you can set to random, which is quite good for a slideshow actually, so that if you've got several slides, the same slides are not showing every time somebody visits the website. What I tend to do is random, unless you've got a specific order that you have in mind. This box here is ticked, so it's a full height slideshow, and that just means it's going to look at the size of screen that it's being viewed on, and it's going to stretch it to the full height. So if you do have that enabled, or you're using that on your website, you need to bear in mind that the image or video indeed needs to be suitable for all different sorts of screens. That's what I was saying earlier about sometimes using the visibility on device section, because sometimes images of a particular layout don't work well on smaller screens. But that's the concept behind one of these blocks. I'm just going to pick out a couple more, because I know there are a couple of other different types on this page. Portfolio is one. So that's just underneath the with dozens of templates ready to use. So let's just scroll down and find that. That's this section here. But normally these would be images rather than coloured blocks. We use these coloured blocks just to show where an image would be. And in this case, it's a portfolio, which is useful for case studies. We use it for our own portfolio of templates on our own website. And if I click on one of those, it'll take me to a new page where there'll be some. In this case, it's another template, of course. So we'll just close that down. But the block works in the same way. If I edit that, you'll see that there are some different styles to choose from, different types of behavior, and in this case, you can set up categories, and this is what we've chosen, that category to display here, or you can just leave it blank. So I think you get the idea. If you come across one of those blocks, then if you edit it and you don't see the content that you're expecting, then it's usually because there's a section elsewhere in the admin that controls that. So let's just show you a couple of those sections. These sections down at the bottom here are mostly for this category. Clients is a way of displaying logos of people you worked with. Animated columns is as it sounds, it sets up animations for blocks, and you can set them up here and add them into your page elsewhere. Edge slider is the one that we've just used. Employees is a good way of showing teams and kind of mug shots with more detail of individuals. FAQs, frequently asked questions. News is a bit like the blog section, which we're going to come to. And generally we use blog rather than news. And portfolios was the one that I mentioned there as well. Testimonials is quite a popular one. So you set up your individual testimonials here with a name and the text and a link to whoever's given it, if that's what you want, and then you would add the relevant block into the page and set the display options there. Let's just show you a couple of these. Let's show you Edge Slider. You can see here that we've got a large number of slides set up in this demo, and if you recall, on the home page it was main slideshow 1, 2 and 3 that were in use. So let's have a look at 1. Again, just like the page, you just click on the title to bring up the edit screen. Now you see that there is a text window at the top here, but that's just not used at all on this section. The information that you need is down here in the slider section. And in this case, you can see that very important element for a slideshow is, of course, the image, or a video if you're going to use a video, which you can choose image or video type from the slider type there. So you upload your image in the same way as I demonstrated before. This is another element, particularly for Edge sliders. So going back to what I was saying about how they display on smaller screens, you can upload a portrait image that would replace this image if your screen is in portrait mode, i.e. it's higher than it is wide. So typically, if you hold your phone, it's a portrait orientation. Usually, you want it to cover the whole background, so that image will stretch to cover the entire screen. And if it needs to crop itself, it will do. But it'll work from the center outwards, and it'll say how wide is the screen that I'm on, stretch to fit the width, and then it'll show as much of the height as it can, cropping off the top and the bottom if it needs to. Various other options. Quite a useful option on the Edge slider is the ability to add captions and buttons. So if I go back to the top there, this first one, you can see that there's let's just go back. It's the one we're looking at. It's got a caption title, a caption description and 2 buttons which can link to somewhere else, and those are set up here. So there's the caption title. It's got a little bit of code means a line break, so they've done that because there's no text editor on this one. There's the caption description, and then down here we've got options for 2 buttons. If you leave these blank, the buttons won't show. That's the way it works. Put information in them and they will show. And you can see that you've got some different styles of button. Outline is the one on the left, the one on the right on this one. And flat is the other one, so that's a solid colour. You can have rounded corners, and it's a little bit rounded or completely rounded. And you can have them dark, light, or the theme skin colour. Now, the theme skin colour is when we set up the site originally. Usually, you'll have given us a logo, and there'll be some colours in that logo. We base the colour scheme off that, and there is something called an accent colour. So we normally try and pick out a bright colour that's part of your colour palette, or we assign one that we think goes with it, and that's what that would be. So in this case, it's orange, as you saw on the front page there. The text that goes on the button and where it links to. Oh, pardon me, I just accidentally hit backspace there. Just go back. And you can do that for up to 2 buttons. As I say, if you leave all that information blank, it just won't, the buttons won't appear at all, so entirely up to you. Portfolios was another one that we just touched on, so let's just have a quick look at that. Again, we've got a load of different portfolio items, and then the block on the page dictates what out of that set is displayed. It can be all, or it can be specific categories. You can see we've got categories here. I'm just going to click on one to show you roughly how it's set up. In this case, we're back to the visual editor. So when you click on this item and you go to its detail page, then you're going to see whatever's displayed here. So that's just simply a way of linking to another page in effect. Here you can see the categories. You can add categories as you go along, just by clicking that and just typing a word in. And you can see that in common with anything in WordPress that uses categories, and blog posts is the usual one, which we'll be coming on to. You can have something in several categories. You can tick as many of these as you want. So that is that's how these sections work. I'm just going to very briefly mention testimonials, because that's a common one that people like to put in. So let's just click on any one of these at random. You can see quite simple information in this case: name of the author, optional company name, job title, optional link to somewhere else, and the quote. You can also add a featured image, which I'll cover in blog posts rather than here, but that also can be then displayed on the testimonials block on the page. Right, well, that brings us neatly to blog posts. Now, if I just go to the front end of this demo website and show you some of these pages, you can see that on this demo website, there are a number of different layouts that are shown. So I'm going to pick one, modern full width. It doesn't really matter, because we can show you how to change these different options as we go along. But a blog typically, and sometimes we might call this a news section, depending on what you want to have within your website. But they usually display in a pretty standard way, in the sense that you see a date, and they're displayed in descending date order. So the most recent one first. These are actually from only 2015, see. But they then go down in date order. And you've got a title, you've got a little bit of text, and a read more button, and that's pretty typical. This one's a fairly minimal layout with no images, but there are lots of other ways of doing it. Let's have a look at, I don't know, grid 3-column. You can see that there are some images, and also some different types of blog layout. So let's show you how that is that's displayed. And it doesn't really matter which page I pick. I'm just going to show you the page structure to start with. Let's just pick the first one that I can see, called blog. So there's nothing on this page, as you can see, because we've within the settings, we've told the system that the blog posts are going to appear on this blog page. Now that's one way of doing it. If I then show you other sample blog pages, let's go to these. These have been more sort of manually set up. And if we've got a Visual Composer section here, and we've got one item in it, and it's called blog. And if I click the edit button for that, again, there are some style options, and these are the different style types that are mentioned on that menu on the front end. And also then some options about what to display. We're going to display specific categories of blog posts, specific posts, or specific authors. Or in this case, it's blank, so it's going to just display everything. Do we want to show the full content in the blog loop? The blog loop just means this long list, basically. Normally you wouldn't show the blog content to the full loop, which is why that's switched off. Normally you would show an excerpt, which is the first X number of characters, and in this case you can see it's set to 300. Normally also, particularly unless you've got just a small number of items, you would have pagination enabled, which shows a certain number per page, 10, and then some options then to scroll through the other pages. So blog here on this page is another example of a block that just has some settings on the page, and then the content is contained elsewhere. And blog posts, as they're called, are contained in this section, posts. Let's click on that. And here you can see it looks much the same as pages or other sections. You've got a list of blog posts. In this case, you can see some other things, categories and tags, which I'll explain in a moment. But other than that, it works in a very similar way. Let's just pick one of these, click edit, click the title rather. It's showing the code again, just click backend editor if you see that. Very similar to pages in a lot of ways. You've got a title, you've got a permalink, which you can edit the end part of. You've got some status stuff, no revisions on this one. You've got a publish date. That's more important actually for blog posts than it is for pages, because it usually displays somewhere on the front end. So that's actually these dates here. You've got categories, which you can either set up centrally here in the category section under post, or you can set up as you go along by just adding new items into the box there. You've also got tags, which is, if you're not familiar with the concept of tag, is like a keyword. It's another way of categorizing things, really, but it can exist independently, and it's usually more done around keywords rather than kind of big groups of things. So you can add keywords. These are ones that have already been used. And you can add new, as you can with categories, you can add new ones as you go along. Quite often on blogs you see what's called tag cloud, which is a sort of a big block of words, and some of them are bigger than others, which means that word is used more often. So that is a good way of doing it. And featured image, which in the case of some of these blog posts you can see have featured images, and some of them don't. To set a featured image, you just click on the image there, and again it's going to show you either things that are already in the media library, or you can upload a new one there, and update the page when you finish. And that's it really. The page is laid out in a particular way here. With blog posts, you don't actually have to use the Visual Composer. If I switch back to classic mode, I could just type plain text in this box and it would display just fine. Just so happens that this one's been set up with some different layout options. So when you click into your blog post area on your website, you might find that there is no Visual Composer there because it hasn't been enabled for this section, in which case you're just typing text in here. If it's not enabled on your website and you want it enabled on your website, please let us know. We can do that easily for you. Okay, so those are the main sections I wanted to cover. There are just a few smaller things that I'll just mention during this video as well. The first one is media. So we've seen, as we've been through pages and posts, there are various ways of uploading images usually, but it can be any sort of media. It could be audio, video, PDFs, that sort of thing. And in most cases, you'll just be adding those as you go along, as you create a page, as you edit a page and so on. But you can get centrally to the media library this way. And you can see there's an add new button here. All of the sections have an add new button. You probably saw them on posts and pages. So if you are adding new items, just click add new and you get a blank version of the same thing. But sometimes you might want to add several images at once, for example. I mean, you can add more than one image in any of the places that I've shown you so far, and then just select the one you want. But you might have, taken a load of images to do with a particular case study and just want to whack them up into the website for use later. So you can do that here as well. The next section I wanted to show you is how we manage the main navigation menu up here. Some of your sites might have a sub-menu down here as well, but they're basically set centrally, and if you create a new page, it doesn't automatically follow that page will then appear magically on this navigation menu. There's a separate step to this. So if I show you where that is, we go Appearance and then Menus. Now, again, because this is a demo site, we've got lots of pages. We've got a very, very complex menu here. But they all operate, you won't have nearly that many items on your menu, but they all operate in the same way. And there's a few key things to note. First of all, it's drag and drop, so I can just pick up any of these elements and I can move them around. Some of them are indented, which means that they're sub-items, as it says there. So if I flick back to the menu and I roll over home, I've got all these ones down here, and those are the ones that are indented under home. And you can see here we've actually got a third level. So when I roll over edge slider effects, you can see there's yet another level. So if you need to have a hierarchy, that's how you do it. And you can just drag these in and out. So I can't do it on that one because that's already a sub-item. But if I wanted this one to be a sub-item of this whole menu, see, I can drag the whole thing to the right, and it will sit in there. So if you've got a new page you want to add to the menu, you can select it from your list of pages here. The default view is most recent, so if you've just created a page, it'll be right at the top, which is quite useful. Or you can view, or you can search. You tick the item, you click Add to Menu, and it puts it right at the bottom, which is a long way down in this case, and then you just drag it into place. If you want to delete an item, which I can show you next, I've just added one that I don't want, you just click the down arrow to open up the panel, and you click Remove. When you finish with all your changes, you do need to click the Save Menu button, which is at the bottom and also at the top here. So just to open up one of these elements again, there are a few other options. Navigation labels. So navigation label is what actually appears on this layout here. So it'll pick up the page title by default, but sometimes you might want to change it, usually because you want something shorter in there. Navigation menus, you're sometimes restricted a little bit on the space that you have, and particularly if you haven't got sub-levels like we have here, you've got a certain amount of horizontal space before you sort of run into the logo, in which case it's going to start wrapping onto a second line, and that's not going to look great. So sometimes with a page title, you'll want to edit it down to something a bit more manageable on the menu, and that's where you do it there. You can also add in direct links on the menu to posts, so that's blog posts. Let's close that down. You can add to categories, so if you've got sort of categories in your blog posts, you can add it to this. And this one, WooCommerce endpoints, only applies to online stores, which is the subject of a separate video. Custom links I'll mention. Sometimes you might need to have a link on your main navigation menu that goes somewhere else to a different website, and that's where you would set it up here. You type in or paste in the address that you want it to go to, you want it to link to, and then the link text is what would appear on the menu. Click Add to Menu in the same way, drag it into position, Save Menu, and that's how you manage menus. Now, I also wanted to, if I scroll right down to the bottom of our demo website, you can see we've got this footer area. It appears on all the pages, so yeah, you can actually edit it so different ones appear on different pages, but that's definitely in the advanced category. For the vast majority of our websites, if you've got a footer area, it will be constant throughout your whole website. And you can see that there are a number of bits of information that appear here. In this case, we've got a bit of a logo, we've got some contact details, we've got a list of recent posts and a list of popular posts. And those are called widgets. And widgets are contained in, again, in appearance and then widgets. It's asking me to whether I want to leave this page, because of course I'll be making changes, but I am going to leave the page because I don't want to save any of those. Now, widgets. So on the right hand side of the page, you've got a number of different widget areas, and they all sort of open and collapse. The ones that we're looking for are the ones that say footer widget area, and they start here: first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Now, your website will have been set up with a number of widget areas. It's probably not 6, it's more likely to be 3 or 4, tends to be the norm. So if your website only has 4 widget areas and you've got stuff in number 6, obviously that's not going to show. But if I open up the first widget area, you can see that in this case it shows the logo. It's not a particularly nice way of doing it, adding it into a text block, but there it is. The second widget area has a bit of text, which is the address information, and it's got a block called Social Networks, which is where we put in the different social network addresses, and some colouring options there. And the third one, you'll remember, it was a list of recent posts. So there's a block called Recent Posts, and the fourth widget area was Popular Posts. Now, over on the left-hand side, you've got the available widgets, as it says here. And the way to change stuff in your widget areas is to find the type of widget you want. Here's one: sub-navigation, which would give us a little menu, and you just drag it over into where you want it to go, and drag it to any position on any of these widget areas. It'll then open up, and you can give it the information that it needs. In this case, I'm just going to delete that one, and it'll take it away. There's a little save button on each of the widgets. So once you've saved that, you can see it's already saved this. There's no central need to save them elsewhere. And then very, very finally, I'm just going to show you where you find certain stylistic elements. Now, this is a whole different section in its own right, and I'm not going to go into it in detail because 9 times out of 10 you'll never need to go here. But I think it's important that you know where it is, so that you know what the options are. And this is theme options. So there's a link up here. Depending on the version that you've got, it might appear in a different place, but it's always on the top bar. And I'm going to click theme options. And there's a whole raft of stuff you can do. Here's the theme accent color that I was mentioning before. Here's where your logo and title is contained. So you might want to upload a different logo. You can see there are different types of logo available. There are different header styles. There are different footer styles. You can see there. So there's our 4-column footer. They're not actually even columns. That looks like I don't know, 2/5 and then 1/5 for each of those, and various other options there. So I'm not going to go into detail because you probably don't need to go here, but I usually just mention that it's there so that if you think you need to make some changes, at least you know what the options are. Good. Okay. Well, that concludes actually the video. So I hope that's been useful for you. I'm just going to bring up my opening slide again, and that's just to reiterate the fact that we have these surgeries twice a week. So if you haven't had all the information that you need, or there's something you need explaining a bit more, or you want a demonstration of a section that we only covered briefly there, then the easiest thing to do is to come along to one of those surgeries, and those are the links, so they will appear on this page with this video, or you can just drop me a line at support@thewebguys.co.uk. I hope that's been useful for you. Any questions, just either, as I say, pop into the surgery or drop us a line. Thanks very much for listening.